My name is Scarlett Lewis, and I am the founder of the Jessie Lewis Choose Love movement. I started this organization following the shooting death of my 6-year-old son, alongside 19 of his classmates in 2 first-grade classrooms and 6 teachers and administrators in one of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history. Directly following the shooting, I had his funeral, obviously, and I got up and spoke. And I said, I believe that this whole tragedy started with an angry thought in the shooter's head, and the shooter's name is Adam Lanza. And I pictured him as a little boy having angry thoughts without the tools and nurturing environment to deal with those thoughts. We know that every thought we have impacts us on a cellular level. And so he went through his life having these angry thoughts that turned into rage, that turned into mental illness, and actually caused the tragedy. And I said, the amazing thing to me is that an angry thought can be changed. So I asked everyone that day, because of course everybody was saying, what can we do for you? And I said, there is something that you can do for us. You can think about what you think about, because everybody has between 60 and 80,000 thoughts. Maybe not you guys, because you guys are more consciously aware, but the majority of people have 60 to 80,000 thoughts broiling in their minds on a daily basis. And research shows that up to 80% of those thoughts are angry and non-productive. And so I said, just think about what you think about, and if you could actively, consciously change one angry thought into a loving thought every day, you will cultivate a safer, more peaceful and loving world. And so the response that I got from that was amazing, that it changed people's lives, that they'd never thought about that. And so I thought, I think that this is part of the solution. So I'm going to talk to you about my personal journey of learning to live a life of integrity. And I'm also going to give you the foundational character values that are required to do this in the form of a formula for choosing love and courage in every situation. I had an experience a few days after Jessie died. I had gone home to my mom's house. She lived across town, and I was sitting on her couch, and for the first time in my entire life, not needing to be somewhere or wanting to move. And I remember sitting there, and I just looked at my arm and my skin at one point, and I thought, oh, there's blood pumping under my skin, and I'm taking breath, I'm taking air into my lungs, so I'm alive, but I feel dead. That was how low I was. You can imagine, I was just in deep mourning, and words really can't describe how bad I felt. And then at one point, I had this other feeling, and it was more like a lightness of being. It just happened all of a sudden. And it was it was a weird experience, and I was like, wait a minute, I feel so bad, and I'm experiencing this, yet I have this almost elation. What is this dichotomy? And all of a sudden I realized, for the first time in my life, I was completely devoid of fear. I had lived through every parent's worst nightmare, and I wasn't afraid to die. And despite what I was going through, this fearlessness was actually a pretty good feeling. And then I looked at what was going on in the world around me, and I realized how fear-based a lot of what's going on is. And it was like I was given a life review. And I looked back over my life and saw all the choices that I had made, and so many of them were fear-based. And at the same time, I had complete and utter compassion for myself, because I understood why I had made those choices in that moment. But I also knew that if I had made my choices based in love, that it would have not only benefited me in the long run, but it would have benefited the world. So I made the conscious decision right then and there. I set the intention to make all of the choices that are possible based in love from then on. Because really, there really are only 2 foundational components that we base all of our decisions on, and that's fear and love. And the decisions that we make based in fear or based in love look very much different. Fear is more like a knee-jerk reaction, and love is more like a conscious and deliberate choice. Like a fear-based decision. And think about how you make your choices, little ones and big ones. So a little choice that you make on a daily basis is, taking vitamins. Do you take them because you're afraid of getting cancer or getting sick? Or do you take them because you want to be well? And driving the speed limit, somebody mentioned that. Do you drive the speed limit because you're afraid of getting into an accident, or because you love everyone and you want everyone to be safe? And a bigger choice that I've made many times is your profession. What do you do in life? Do you do it because you're afraid you can't make a living and you just need to get money? Or do you do it because it's something that's satisfying your soul and you really want to do? Those are just examples. So a little less than a week after the shooting, I went back to my little farmhouse where I raised my 2 boys as a single mom, and I found a message that Jesse had left on my kitchen chalkboard shortly before he died. He wrote 3 words. Remember, he was 6 years old. Nurturing, healing, love. Now, those words are not in the vernacular of a 6-year-old. They're phonetically spelled because he was in 1st grade and just learning to write. But those 3 words are in the definition of compassion across all cultures. And I knew immediately that he had a spiritual awareness, that he wasn't going to be with us for very much longer. And I knew that he wanted to leave a message of comfort for his family and friends, but I also knew it was more than that. I knew that this was where we had to move towards nurturing, healing, love, in order for our society to survive and to thrive. And I knew that I would spend the rest of my life spreading this message. Nurturing, healing, love actually makes up a profound and powerful formula for choosing love. Nurturing means loving kindness and gratitude. Healing literally means forgiveness. And love is compassion in action. When you practice those 3 character values in that order, you're choosing love. It's like a rope that you let down to yourself in the well, however deep it is. And you start by being grateful, practicing gratitude. And there's always something to be grateful for. Your breath, as Bob said in his beautiful song. And then that gives you the strength to be able to forgive. And that's forgiving yourself and others. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then, once you've done that, you are able to step outside of your own universe of pain and help others. That is literally choosing love. And of course, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to do that, because it takes courage to be grateful when things aren't going your way. It takes courage to forgive, especially when the person that hurt you isn't sorry. And it takes courage to be able to step outside of your own personal story and pain and whatever circumstance you're in and be in service to others. So Jesse is an incredible example of courage, and actually the ultimate form of courage. When the gunman came into his 1st grade classroom, he continued his killing spree, and his gun ran out of ammunition. And it was during the short delay that Jesse called to his friends and told them to run. And they said that it's because he told them to run that they ran. And he was able to save 9 of his friends' lives before he was gunned down right next to the side of his teacher. This is the ultimate form of courage, laying down your life for your friends. And hopefully none of us in this room will ever be called to do that. But courage is we all have the courage within us that it takes to choose love. Because in life, as we always know, we can't always choose what happens to us, but we can always choose how we respond, and we can always respond in love. I have a great quote by C.S. Lewis, and I'm going to read you the whole thing. Every time you make a choice, you're turning the central part of you, the part of you that chooses, into something a little different than it was before. And taking your life as a whole, with all your innumerable choices, all your life long, you're slowly turning this central thing into a heavenly creature or a hellish creature, either into a creature that is in harmony with God and with other creatures and with itself, or else into one that is in a state of war and hatred with God and with its fellow creatures and with itself. To be the one kind of creature is heaven. That is, it is joy and peace and knowledge and power. To be the other means madness, horror, idiocy, rage, impotence, and eternal loneliness. Each of us at each moment is progressing to one state or the other. Just to underline the importance of choosing love, because when you choose love, you're not only impacting yourself, but you're impacting the world. I want to talk just a little bit about forgiveness. I didn't mention forgiveness in my title because if I had, you guys probably would have chosen this time to take a bathroom break, because forgiveness is really not that popular a topic. We don't talk about it often. We certainly don't teach it. I grew up in a traditionally religious church, and all I knew was that you forgive so you're forgiven. I didn't know anything else about it, but I learned so much after my experience. And I learned a lot about what forgiveness isn't. So we say forgive and forget, right? Well, that makes it an immediate impossibility for me, because not only can I not forget, I travel the world trying to make people not forget and to remember and to be part of the solution. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you condone what the person did. I'll never condone what the shooter did. What he did was obviously wrong. And it also doesn't mean that you don't hold the other person accountable, because we're all accountable for our actions and our inactions. Usually when I describe it, I give a visual. So I felt like I was attached to Adam Lanza with an umbilical cord. And this cord ran out of my side into his, and all of my personal power drained out of me in the form of anger through this cord into him. And I was dragging him around with me everywhere because I was angry. This was in the beginning. And forgiveness was a big set of scissors that I took. And I cut that cord, and immediately, by forgiving, felt all my personal power flow back into me. And of course, forgiveness is a conscious choice in the beginning, but then it becomes a process, because it doesn't mean that you don't get angry again. And this is important to talk about. You do get angry again. There are things that come up, and that's memories, and that's okay, because you just choose to forgive again. So it becomes a process. And it's actually my key to my resilience. Somebody asked me earlier during lunch, what's the number one thing that helped you heal after the tragedy? That was part of the question. And I said, it has to be forgiveness. Forgiveness is key. I also learned the true meaning of compassion. Sometimes compassion is taught as empathy, in schools at least. And compassion actually has two components. So compassion, the first part of compassion is identifying with someone's pain, and that is empathy. And as you all probably know now, having heard my story, that's painful. And it actually lights up the same receptors in your brain as physical pain. And so teaching compassion as empathy is really doing it a disservice, because the second part of compassion, and the most powerful part, is the action component. And that's when you actively do something to help ease another's pain. That's the miraculous component, when all the love and energy that you give out comes back to you. It's when the healer becomes the healed. It's when the line between the giver and the receiver is blurred. And I learned this important concept by how the world reacted, because they not only felt empathy for us, but they actually actively did things to help ease our pain by doing acts of kindness and things like that. But I also learned this lesson from my other son, JT. JT was 12 years old at the time. And as you can imagine, he and I were going through a hard time initially. There was, in my mind, there were a lot of people that were trying to help, but they weren't really, no one had ever experienced what we had experienced. So I was really looking for credibility. And everyone was going through their own traumatic experiences. So believe it or not, JT and I were kind of struggling, and he hadn't gone back to school. And I would go in and I would say, "Do you want to go to school today?" And he would say, "No." And I would go, "Phew." You know, because I had sent one kid to school and he didn't come home. I really didn't want him to go, so I wasn't being a big help. And so we were kind of stuck. And we had this incredible experience where orphan genocide survivors from Rwanda reached out to JT from all the way around the world via live Skype and wanted to connect with him. So this is a picture of that experience in JT's room. And they said, "JT, we heard about what happened to your little brother, and we're so sorry. We want to share our experience with you, and we want you to know that you're going to be okay and you're going to feel joy again." Now, this was incredible because, you know, whereas people had said to us, "Oh, time heals all wounds. Oh, you're going to be okay in a little while," these people had been through something perhaps worse than we had. In 1994, there was a genocide in Rwanda where over 1 million Tutsis were murdered by their neighboring Hutus within 100 days. So they started sharing their experience, and amazingly, it was the same process of healing that Jesse had left on the kitchen chalkboard. So they talked about, after witnessing their families being murdered right in front of them, one was buried in a shallow grave alongside alongside her family, alive, getting into an orphanage. They said they started feeling this incredible sense of gratitude for their safety, for the food, for the compassion they were receiving, and then they realized they had to forgive. And if they didn't forgive, they would be going down the same path of anger and destruction as the people that had murdered their families. And then they realized that they could find meaning in their suffering by using their story to help other people, like they did with JT. And JT, after this experience, turned around and started Newtown Helps Rwanda. And within a couple of months, he was able to Skype back to that group and announce that he had raised enough money. He went to school the next day, by the way, and made these bands and started raising money, and was able to announce to one of the orphan genocide survivors that he had saved enough money to send them to university for 4 years. And that made him feel so good, focusing on someone else's pain. And by the way, JT doesn't do traditional therapy. He doesn't like it. It doesn't work for him. He doesn't like talking about it. But for the last 3.5 years, he has been doing this compassion in action. He's helped build a fish pond, a self-sustainable fish pond for former children soldiers in Uganda. He's helped countless kids in the United States that have faced trauma. And he's healing by helping heal other people. It was really, it continues to be, an incredible lesson for me in the power of compassion in action and service. So I know what you're all thinking. Does the Choose Love formula work for everyone in every circumstance? So I've been to a few prisons, and it's interesting that you're starting a prison program. And this one day, I brought JT because he had the day off. He looks thrilled. And it was one of the most incredible days of our lives. So I had sent my book 2 weeks earlier, Nurturing Healing Love, and sent that book up. And then the plan was for us to come up 2 weeks later to talk to 20 convicted felons about it. And first of all, I was pretty sure that convicted felons were not going to pick up a book called Nurturing Healing Love. But I was happy to send the book anyway. And when we got there, as you can see, everybody's holding their book. It was dog-eared, underlined. The guys some had even written out entire paragraphs in it and were asking questions. I was able to share the example of Jesse's courage and really what courage means, which is not the big tough guy, revenge type courage, but it's the courage to be kind and gentle. It's the courage to practice those character values that lead you to choosing love. And they had said, the only thing we've ever known is anger and revenge, and that feels bad. And I said, that's true, and you can make yourselves feel good by choosing love. And at the end of the 2 hours, everyone had dedicated their lives to choosing love. And they had asked me for a picture of Jesse so that when they had an angry thought, they could look at his face, remember his courage, and choose a loving thought. Men that are considered non-rehabilitatable, when they're given the option, when they're shown how to choose love, they wanted to choose love. Because at the very core of all of us, we all just want to love and be loved. That's the basis for all the fear that we see. And so when they were given a formula for choosing love, of course they wanted to practice that. It was really beautiful. I want to talk a little bit about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because that was the first thought after Jesse died. Really, it was like, oh my God, I'm definitely going to be getting PTSD. And my fear was, like, how is that going to manifest in myself? Am I going to be institutionalized? That was my big fear. And what I didn't know, and what I wish had been implanted in my head, this PTG seed. PTG is post-traumatic growth. So roughly 3% of the population suffer from PTSD, and everybody knows about PTSD. But not as many people know about post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth is what the majority of us experience after a trauma. It's when we find strength we never knew we had. It's when we gain a new perspective. It's when we deepen our spirituality. It's when we find a purpose. It's when we strengthen relationships or weed out bad ones. And the growth that comes from post-traumatic growth is not resilience. Because resilience is when you bounce back from where you were to back to where you were. PTG's growth is unlimited. It's exponential. So I thought, what if we planted the seed of post-traumatic growth in kids and said, you know what, things are going to happen to you. And they're not all going to be good. But you know what? When something happens and it's uncomfortable, when it's really bad, it's not something to fear. It's not something to avoid, go around, anesthetize yourself from. Actually, it's an opportunity for growth. And you can sit with it, and you can look into it, and you can, with curiosity, ask yourself, what are the lessons in here for me? Wouldn't that take a lot of fear out of what happens in life? I know that I would have come this way a lot quicker had I known about post-traumatic growth. Of course, the time is not after something devastating like losing a child happens. You don't want somebody to sit down next to you and say, hey, this is a great opportunity for growth. That's not the right time to do it. It has to be planted before. So my mission is to get Jesse's message of nurturing, healing love in the form of this formula for choosing love into schools. I think about what we teach in schools. We have state-mandated anti-bullying programs, state-mandated drug awareness programs. We have suicide prevention and sex ed. Those were the 4 that they teach at JT's school. And I think about how that is such a focus on the negative. So we're saying to kids, this is what you can't do to feel good. And we're not giving them any option for a positive way. So how about teaching them to choose love? How about giving them tools to rest and relax? Giving them the responsibility for their own emotional regulation. Wouldn't that be an incredible society? So the Jessie Lewis Choose Love movement is developing a Choose Love enrichment program, pre-K through 12th grade, that does just this. And it's going to be absolutely free. All of the resources will be free. And that's to fulfill my mission of making sure that every child has access to social emotional learning, 21st century life skills that I consider to be life-changing and life-saving. And I think if the shooter in our situation had this, it wouldn't have happened. I want to wrap it up by sharing another message that Jesse left. On the same day that I found the Nurturing, Healing, Love message, JT went into his little office and he found a note that was folded on his desk, and he opened it up, and Jesse had left him a message, and it said, have a lot of fun. And this is such a profound message from a little brother to a big brother. But also I took that as a message for all of us, because we're here to have a lot of fun too, and I think that we need to remember that. So to live a life of integrity means to choose love, right? And it means to acknowledge your courage. It means to take personal responsibility for your feelings. And I think when you do that, you'll realize that you're having a lot of fun. Thank you.